Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm your host for today, Kate Carter.
I'm Kylie Colwell.
And I'm Holly Spear.
Per usual, I'm just going to kind of jump right into today's episode. So, this is going to be a wild case. There's going to be a few names that are mentioned. It's going to circulate around four individuals. The four individuals I'll be talking about today: Daniel Wozniak, Rachel May Buffett, Sam Herr, and Julie Kibishi. I'm going to tell you guys about all four of these people, but ultimately they're going to circle back together and it's all going to make sense. Julie was born on February 14th, 1987, in Newport Beach, California. She had a pretty normal childhood, which we love. She was a softball starter and really had a passion for dance. She began taking dance lessons when she was around 5 years old and fell in love from there. Growing up, she would spend hours every single day practicing. She was in competitions all the time, and she basically would do anything to further her love for dance, and her parents supported all of it. Julie had a very bubbly and outgoing personality, and everyone would tell you that she was passionate about art. That was her big thing, was art. After high school, she attended the Orange County School of the Arts and then ended up studying fashion design at the Orange Coast Community College. All of Julie's friends and families would tell you that she was a free-spirited type of person. She didn't take herself too seriously, as you can see from the picture I sent you guys, ladies. She loved to wear bold makeup and fun outfits. So one of Julie's dreams was to become a mom. And in 2010, Julie began an online relationship with a U.S. Marine who was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. Though they were far apart, the two of them were really excited to be able to meet each other pretty soon. They had like this plan. I don't know how long they had been dating for, but they had a plan that once he came back from Japan, they were going to meet up for a summer and like spend the summer together.
I think I know this one.
Stop. Really?
Does it involve like an acting theater?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Damn. I didn't think you were going to know this at all.
Oops.
Julie's in a relationship online, never met in person, totally fine, normal. He was in the military. So, in one of Julie's college classes, she began a friendship with a guy named Sam. So, they met each other because Julie started tutoring Sam in anthropology. Though people like early on questioned whether or not Julie and Sam were more than friends, they both always said that they were kind of like siblings to each other and looked at each other that way. Sam was this big dude who was very intimidating looking, and Julie was like this little petite girl. But Julie always said that he was the teddy bear on the inside. Sam Herr was born in Los Angeles, California on May 29th, 1983. He was an only child, and both of his parents were school teachers. Sam had a really close relationship with his parents. He grew up very athletic, playing all the sports like hockey, jiu-jitsu, track, and weightlifting. Sam definitely looked the part too. He was this tall, muscular guy with an athletic build. But Sam actually did end up having a little bit of a rough childhood because when he was around 12 years old, he began treatment for bulimia and obsessive compulsive disorder. When he was around 16 years old, he was able to stop treatment and medication, but his parents decided to send him to an alternative high school due to some like learning challenges that he had. Also, just imagine starting all of that at 12 years old. Like, that's nuts.
I cannot imagine.
Sam wasn't like a troublemaker. He wasn't into like crime or gang relations, but one of his best friends, whose name was Byron. So Sam and Byron were in the same high school. And one day, Byron was actually beaten and stabbed to death in a park by a rival gang. When this happened, Sam was 18 years old, and the police actually ended up accusing Sam of luring his friend into the park before he was killed by other people. Sam was arrested and almost spent a year in jail waiting on a trial. Him and his family maintained that he was always innocent. And about 6 months into jail, Sam was actually evaluated by a prison psychiatrist. When the psychiatrist went in to see Sam for the first time, he was actually wearing a suicide prevention suit. Psychiatrist didn't know this ahead of time. After the evaluation, the doctor ended up writing that Sam was mentally ill and needed continued medication and treatment. After this evaluation, though, about a year into being in jail, Sam ended up being acquitted of the charges and released back to his family.
Being in jail that long is going to cause some issues too, especially
Right.
to the minor, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
especially if you're like, you were being accused of helping kill your best friend when you didn't. I feel like that's also just a mind like fuck.
Oh, yeah, just like the scrutiny you would have gotten from even being accused would have
Yeah.
been terrific.
After Sam was released from jail, he ended up working odd jobs here and there, but he eventually decided that he was going to enlist in the US Army. Sam's dad is actually a former Marine. So his dad was very happy that Sam was going to be entering the military and kind of following in his footsteps. While Sam was in training, he was in Germany and he met a fellow female soldier named Teresa. And Teresa was actually having a really difficult time being in the military. She ended up being only 1 out of 5 women in her unit. And so she was kind of constantly harassed by her fellow like men soldiers. When Sam heard about Teresa, he promised he was going to help her. He would often cook food for himself every single day. And so he started making extra to give some to Teresa. And then he would even walk her to and from her dorm each morning and each night to make sure, like, where she was going to get safely. So this is kind of just like one of the examples I found of like Sam was a good guy. So at the time that Sam was in the military, there was a policy. I don't know if you guys know about this, but it's called Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Familiar-ish
Okay.
with it.
For those who don't know what it is, this is basically a policy that all US military had in regards to gay or bisexual soldiers. If you don't ask them what their sexual preference is, then they didn't have to tell you. I knew about the policy. I didn't know when it was like canceled. The policy wasn't canceled until September 2011, way past when it should have been canceled.
We didn't legalize gay marriage until like a couple years before that.
Yeah, you're right, actually. We're so far behind.
Dang true.
While Sam was in the army, he made it a priority to look out for the people that were in the like don't ask, don't tell kind of section. He always made sure that they felt comfortable and unharmed. So at some point, Sam ended up being deployed at an Afghanistan-Pakistan border. He was there to fight in a combat role. Sam always felt as if it was his duty to be the one that takes on more dangerous roles when he was deployed, and his fellow soldiers would agree, saying that he was one of the more brave ones of the unit, and he'd tend to like set high standards for everyone else. After a year and a half in Afghanistan, Sam was shipped off to Germany to finish up his last 11 months of service. While in Germany, Sam and his soldier friends were able to travel often, and that's how Sam met a girl named Katarina. She was German and lived near base. They ended up having a serious relationship together. And once Sam got out of the military, he even flew Katarina out to California often to meet his parents. She would stay for long periods of time. And like each time she visited, she would stay longer and longer. So it was really nice. Eventually, they got engaged. They weren't really in a rush to have a wedding because they kind of wanted to figure out where they wanted to settle down first. She wasn't a US citizen. He kind of wanted to stay in the US, didn't know if he wanted to stay in California. But unfortunately, just like most veterans, Sam suffered from PTSD after returning home from deployment. He often had horrible night terrors and would wake up screaming in a cold sweat and tend to always be reaching out for a weapon to defend himself. But Sam didn't let his PTSD define him. He took the deployment pay that he had earned and decided to put himself in college. His dreams were to get a degree, re-enlist in the military, climb up the ranks to a high-ranking officer, and be able to buy a house for himself and his family. So the college that Sam ended up deciding to go to was Orange Coast Community College, which is where Julie went. While in school, he rented an apartment that was located across the street, Camden Martinique Apartments. This was a complex that catered to really younger adults who were attending the local colleges nearby. So at this apartment complex, like a lot of college ones, it kind of catered to parties. People would often gather there since it was so close. And a lot of the parties would take place by the complex pool, which happened to be right next to Sam's apartment unit as well. Eventually, at one of these pool parties, Sam met 2 actors who were named Rachel Buffett and Daniel Wozniak. Daniel Patrick Wozniak was born on March 23rd, 1984 in Long Beach, California, to a Catholic family. His parents were named Mary Ann and Daryl, and Daniel had 2 brothers named Timothy and Michael. Growing up, Daniel was really into the arts. He was part of the school choir. He would like act in all the musicals and plays, and he would go to any and all local auditions. Daniel's friends tend to describe him as a goofy personality and that he was overall a really outgoing and kind person. And it was also very easy to like spot Daniel out in a crowd because he was quite tall and he had a signature look, Hawaiian shirts. I feel like we all know one of those guys. Daniel graduated from high school in 2002, and he decided to study drama at the Golden West College in Huntington Beach, California. While he was in school, he was able to reconnect with a former theater kid from his high school named Allison. Now, Allison, she's not really going to play part in this case, but her parents opened up a nearby theater, and Daniel would often audition for their plays. He went on to also directing some of the plays and musicals and would even do so at local high schools. He was often well known from the parents at the theater. He would babysit their kids. So like he was kind of always involved in like the drama scene. One of the things about Daniel though is that he was always known to try to impress people. For example, Allison would say that like whenever they'd go out to eat or go get drinks, Daniel would always pick up the tab for everyone, even if he didn't know them. But obviously, acting does not really pay that well. Daniel always seemed to be low on money because he also wasn't good at keeping jobs. He would work odd jobs here and there, but he would always seem to get fired from them. And some of the jobs that fired Daniel also accused him of stealing. A little bit of a red flag there. Another thing is that Daniel also liked to drink, especially when he was out with his friends. But overall, his friends said that he was like a happy drunk and harmless. He just happened to be like slightly of an alcoholic. Daniel over the years would occasionally have on and off girlfriends. This is really sad, but they would all always end up dumping him and say that like they just wanted to be friends and that he was like kind of more of a brother, which is very sad.
Oh, he's friend zoned.
I feel like that happens a lot for people who make Hawaiian shirts their thing.
Yeah, not to like diss people who wear Hawaiian shirts, but
We all know a guy
yeah,
who keeps getting friend zoned, and he also happens to own a lot of Hawaiian shirts. I'm not
Yeah.
saying they're connected, but
he does. Or plaid shorts. That's another thing that like pops up in my head. Yeah.
Both of them together.
a deadly combination.
So Daniel's family was pretty supportive of his acting career. They would often attend all of his performances and they would push him to audition for more things. But their relationship all kind of changed once Daniel met a woman named Rachel Buffett. So now on to Rachel. Rachel Mae Buffett was born on July 20th, 1987 in Orange County, California, also to a Catholic family. And she had two brothers named Noah and Nathan and a younger sister named Hannah. The Buffett children were homeschooled by their parents and they ended up being pretty sheltered as a result of it. I do want to say something. Okay.
Oh, boy.
I know people who have been homeschooled and they turned out totally fine.
Like Kylie.
I know people who have been homeschooled and they didn't turn out
Oh,
totally
Like Kylie.
you think you're totally fine.
I would say half and half.
Kylie, how long were you homeschooled for?
Only 3 years.
Okay. I did a
Those
year.
3 years affected her. That's the 50-50 that we're talking about here.
Yeah. So, anyways, Rachel and her family were part of the ones that got really sheltered from being homeschooled. Rachel's family was very artistic, so that's where she found her love for acting. She went on to study acting at a local community college, at some point even snagged a job as Princess Ariel at Disneyland. After Disneyland, Rachel worked as a damsel at Medieval Times. Do you guys remember Medieval Times? Did you ever have those?
Yeah, hated them.
Anyway, she went from being Princess Ariel to a damsel. She loved doing theater. She was also known to participate in local theater productions, which is how she met Daniel. The two of them met in 2005 while they were working on a play together. Originally, Rachel thought that Daniel was this really friendly guy, but after they started hanging out regularly and a few years went by, the two decided to date. Eventually, they decided to move in with each other, but neither parents approved of them moving in because they wanted them to wait until marriage. So they had to kind of lie about their situation. And at some point, Rachel and Daniel decided to move in with Rachel's brother. And anytime her parents came into town, Rachel would make sure that Daniel wasn't home. So it was like this big secret that they lived with each other. In 2008, Rachel and Daniel got engaged when Daniel proposed with what he said was his grandmother's wedding ring. So people at the local theater said that the two quickly became a power couple and they were quite inseparable. But others said that it was quite obvious that Rachel was controlling and possessive of Daniel. Other than acting, neither Rachel or Daniel had jobs. So they didn't really have any income, which is like a big problem. And that ended up being a big issue in their relationship, which you'll find out later about.
Yeah, that's usually a big problem.
When Daniel first started dating Rachel, his parents didn't really approve of the relationship because Rachel seemed to control Daniel, and they ended up seeing him less and less over time. Daniel at some point even dropped out of college and didn't tell his parents. They didn't even know that he was engaged until a mutual friend let them know months later. Daniel even went as far to create a fake email for his parents and gave that to Rachel's parents for communication. Daniel said that he didn't want the parents to talk because his parents didn't approve of Rachel since she wasn't a doctor or having some high paying job. Which, like, in my mind, when I first saw that, like in an article, I was like, oh, his parents wanted her to be the doctor or the person with the job. Like, he doesn't have money either. And he's an actor as well. You know, it's like vice versa.
Is that what he's telling Rachel's parents, or does the family dislike her because she's controlling? Or what's
Well,
the issue?
in reality, according to the Wozniak family, Daniel stopped talking to them after he was caught stealing money from them. So Daniel was also lying to them about attending college, which they were paying for. So he would just pocket that money the whole time. There was even one time that they caught Daniel trying to sell one of their cars.
Oh,
Daniel even stole his father's new 38 caliber revolver and lied to his dad's face about it, even though they had video proof from a security camera like footage of him taking it.
so they don't have jobs, but they are trying to get an income, it looks like.
Yes. So it was just a whole shit show. But even though all of this had happened and Daniel was kind of being a shit child, his parents never kicked him out and they never wanted their relationship to end because they didn't want to like lose him. After Daniel decided that he wanted to marry Rachel, he left and basically cut all ties with his family around November of 2009. Rachel and Daniel's wedding was planned for May 28th, 2010 in Long Beach. Daniel, of course, didn't invite any of his family members, but they did invite some of their new friends, including Sam. Like I said before, Sam was a super outgoing person, so he had made a lot of friends at the apartment complex that they lived at. One of these friends was named Ruben. Ruben was also in Sam's college classes. Push comes to shove, Ruben meets Julie at some point. Like, everybody lives in the apartment complex. So like it's just like a flowing of like names and stuff, but it'll make sense. So Ruben meets Julie. Julie is now also hanging out at the apartment complex because of Ruben. So that's how Sam meets Julie, is like the mutual friend. Ruben guy and Julie are hanging out by the pool, and at some point they run into Daniel and Rachel. So now everybody's all met each other. Julie and Rachel hit it off right away. Both of them loved the performing arts and they ended up bonding quickly. But Ruben was not a fan of Daniel. Ruben thought that Daniel was annoying and had a fake personality. Daniel even rubbed Ruben wrong enough, basically, that Ruben decided to say something to Sam about him and how he didn't trust him to like be careful around him. But Sam said like Daniel was a nice guy and he was trying to make friends and maybe he was a little socially awkward. So he was like, it's cool. I get it. Like, you don't like him, but trust me, like, he's fine. May 15th comes around and Daniel ends up being arrested on a DUI because him and Rachel didn't have any money. Daniel started calling around asking his friends for help. Eventually, he phoned Sam. That's when Daniel found out about Sam's deployment combat pay that I talked about earlier. Fortunately, someone else ended up bailing Daniel out of jail before Sam got around to it. Daniel now knew that Sam had a little bit of money on him. A day after Daniel had been arrested, him and Sam were at the apartment complex hot tub just chilling. Daniel was complaining to Sam about his arrest, and Sam decides to open up to Daniel about his past and how he had experienced being in jail as well. This is kind of something that Daniel never forgot about. So, May 2010, pretty busy month for Daniel and Rachel. They're finishing up a production at the local theater, and the couple's wedding is at the end of the month, so it's coming up really quickly. But if you remember, like I keep saying, they have no money, they have no jobs. So, paying for this upcoming wedding was super stressful. They kept borrowing money from friends, and Daniel was even writing bad checks to the wedding vendors because it ended up his bank account was in the negatives. They were even about to get evicted from the apartment complex after having been warned about past due rent multiple times. So the pair was needing to come up with money and quick. After one of the couple's theater performances one night, they met a man that was working at the theater named Chris, and they decided to go out to drinks with him after the production. Almost immediately, like they get to the bar, almost immediately, they just met this dude. Daniel asked Chris for some money. He's like, yo, I need to borrow money. I'm in a tight place. Can I have $3,000? Chris is like, I don't know you. But after he hears Daniel's story, and I guess Daniel put on like this big facade, Chris gave Daniel $2,000 as a loan. Which, like, you guys asked me for money? I mean, okay, well, this is a little different. But like, a stranger asked me for money, $2,000? No.
You'd be lucky to get $20 out of me.
Yeah. Chris decided to tell Daniel, though, that this money came from like some mob ties that he had. So he needed to be repaid as soon as possible. And that was a lie, but Chris just wanted to make sure that like Daniel was scared enough to be like repay him this money. Around May 21st, just a few days before the wedding, Julie had actually sent Rachel a message on Facebook about how she missed hanging out with her and how she was excited for Rachel to have her wedding the upcoming weekend. Rachel messaged Julie back saying sorry for being distant. She was just so busy and that they would hang out soon. And at the same time that this was happening, Rachel noticed that Daniel was walking around their apartment in stress, but refused to tell Rachel what was going on. This happened to be the day that Daniel was supposed to repay Chris, but he didn't come up with any of the money. So Daniel told Rachel that he was going to go upstairs to Sam's apartment for a little while and would come back in a bit. Daniel went and talked to Sam about how stressed out he was about his financial situation, and Sam even suggested that Daniel should consider joining the military like the Coast Guard. He told him that if he joined, this housing situation would be taken care of and he would make good salary. But this answer obviously wasn't good enough for Daniel because he was looking to make money like right then and there. Sam kind of helped Daniel out and decided to do some chores and help him move some furniture. As Sam and Daniel were about to head out of Sam's apartment, this dude, Chris, arrives. Daniel told him, hey, Chris, like, we'll be right back with the money. Chris obviously assumed it would be like a few minutes, but it ended up being a few hours. So Chris is just like chilling in Daniel's apartment with Rachel, just random, met once. Daniel finally arrived back at the apartment and ended up throwing a few stacks of bills at Chris. Chris was super taken back by this, and he didn't understand how Daniel was acting. Daniel was shaking, and it seemed extremely nervous about the whole situation. But when Chris looked down at the money, it ended up only being $400. So Chris asked Daniel if this was all the money that he had, and Daniel didn't respond. He just kind of stood there. So Chris ended up handing Daniel some of the money for him to be able to buy some groceries or dinner that night. But in that moment, when all of this was happening, neither Daniel or Rachel were saying anything to Chris. They were just staring at him. So he left as soon as possible. Like not long after Chris left their apartment, he noticed he had a missed call from Daniel. So he called Daniel back and Rachel answered the phone and said like, hey, Chris, you accidentally left some of your money at the apartment. You should come back and get it. And Chris was like, oh no, I gave that to Daniel for groceries, like so that you guys can have some food. Rachel was like, no, you should really come back and get that money from the apartment. Chris was really confused by the phone call, but he immediately got bad vibes from it. He asked Rachel if everything was okay. And that's when she said that she wasn't worried about the money, but she was worried about something else. And then she hung up the phone. On the same day, May 21st, Julie was going about her day back at her parents' house. But around 5 p.m., she started to get some weird text messages coming in from Sam. He was texting her like, hey, can you come over tonight at midnight? And she didn't respond quick enough. And so he would text again, going out for a bit, very upset, need to talk. Still, Julie didn't respond because these texts were very unlike Sam. And then another text came in saying, please, no sex. I need to talk to someone. And this is when Julie responded for the first time saying, LOL, ooh, Sam, we're like brother and sister. What do you mean no sex? Sam then texted back, I'm hurting with some bad fam crap. I can't be alone. No sex, please. I'm begging you as a brother. Even though Julie was super confused by all of these texts, because Sam never texted or spoke like that, Julie wasn't the type of person to let her friends down. So she told Sam that, of course, she would meet up with him that night. That same night, Chris was working at the local theater while Rachel and Daniel were performing in a play. At the end of the play, Chris went up to Rachel and congratulated her and said the part that she faked cried in the play was really impressive. But Rachel went on to tell Chris that it wasn't fake crying, that something had happened after Chris left their apartment that day, and she was really upset, so the tears were real. Same night, Julie ends up leaving her parents' house and she goes out to eat with her brother and his fiance at a local restaurant. She's like going to help them start planning their wedding. They're really excited. And her brother's fiance even asked Julie if she wanted to be a bridesmaid. And of course, Julie was super excited and gave her a bridesmaid tiara. Julie was very excited and she ended up wearing the tiara for the rest of the night. But after dinner, she started getting weird texts from Sam again. And it was around 11 p.m. now, and Sam was asking Julie if she was coming over soon and that he needed to see her. So Julie told her brother and future sister-in-law that she needed to go, and she was off to visit Sam. Her brother told her to be safe and have fun, but to let him know when she arrived so he could make sure she was safe. Around midnight, Julie arrived at the apartment complex and texted Sam, "Hey, buddy, I'm here, walking up to your place." Julie then texted her brother that she had arrived at the apartment complex and was safe. Shortly after, her brother received another text saying, "Uh-oh, doesn't look good, crying, sad face emoji." So the next morning rolls around. It's May 22nd. And Julie's mother noticed that Julie never came home from the night before. And this happened to be the day of Julie's sister's prom. So there's no way, or at least they thought there was no way that Julie was going to miss that. Julie's mom continued to call her phone and text her, but got no response. So Julie's mom then contacted her son that Julie went out to with the night before, and he said that she had gone to Sam's the night before, but had texted him that she was safe. But still, no one was able to get in contact with Julie. So her mom decided right then and there she was going to call the police. And as you can imagine, they didn't really care that much. They told Julie's mom that Julie was a 23-year-old who probably went out drinking, crashed at a friend's house, and now was hungover. She was probably embarrassed and would show up eventually. Of course, Julie's mom didn't agree with us because she knew her daughter, and it didn't sound like that at all. Police side, it had only been like 10 hours. And Julie's mom told her she went out the night before.
I feel like the hungover excuse isn't a good one either, because even if I'm literally dying in my bed, I will still respond to a text like, "Hey, I'm alive, but I'm dead."
Right.
Right.
There's no way I would no show, no text kind of thing. At the exact same time, Sam's family was also getting concerned. His dad hadn't heard from him in over 24 hours, and all of his calls were going straight to voicemail, which was very unusual. That weekend, Sam was supposed to visit and stay at his parents' house, but never showed up. So his dad decided to drive out to the apartment complex. So Ruben, the guy from earlier, that's Sam's friend, was also having no luck getting in contact with Sam. Apparently that day, Sam had made plans to go to a beach party, and Sam never showed up or contacted Ruben, which again was very unlike him. So when Sam never showed up, Ruben continued to call Sam's phone, but no one answered. Finally, after a few attempts, someone picked up the phone. Ruben knew right away it wasn't Sam's voice, though. It was a guy's voice, but Ruben couldn't recognize it. Ruben knew 100% that it wasn't Sam.
So this person on the other end of the line thinks they're just going to get away with pretending to be Sam.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, like why even answer the phone?
Yeah.
Sam's dad, his name is Steve. Steve's going to be a part of this story from now on, but I will continue to say Sam's dad, Steve, so you don't get confused. So Sam's dad, Steve, drove to Sam's apartment, like I said, and he ended up arriving around 9 p.m. that night. He used his spare key to get inside of the apartment, but once inside, he didn't find Sam. But when Steve walked into the bedroom, what he saw next was absolutely horrific. It was Julie's body kneeling over the side of Sam's bed. She had a gunshot wound to her head. Her pants were also cut open and pulled back behind her knees. There was also something written on the back of Julie's shirt. In all black ink, it said, quote, "All yours, fuck you," end quote.
Oh. We're in I'm assuming a fairly large apartment complex. No one reported a gunshot in one of the apartments?
I will say that never comes up in the story, and I was never able to find anything about that. So very weird. So Steve immediately calls 911, and he's crying on the phone to the operator saying that there was a dead person in his son's apartment and that his son was missing. While Steve was talking to 911, one of Sam's friends, Jake, actually walked straight into his apartment. Jake was drunk. He had gone to the beach party earlier, and Sam hadn't shown up to. So Jake was swinging by his apartment to make sure he was okay before going upstairs to his own apartment, which is like very sweet. But obviously, Steve didn't want anyone inside of the apartment due to what he had just found, so him and Jake waited outside. Once the police arrived, they found Julie's body inside Sam's bedroom, just like his dad had said. Her purse was sitting on a bench in the kitchen, and an invitation to Daniel and Rachel's wedding was right next to it. Obviously, the cops asked Sam's dad if he knew if his son owned any type of gun or weapon, but Steve continued to tell them that his son would have never have done this and that he was missing. Like, he was very adamant, like, Sam is missing, he didn't do this. But with Julie's body being found in his apartment, to the police, it looked like Sam was on the run. So he ended up becoming their number one prime suspect. So then, to make matters worse, when the police discovered Sam's prior arrest record from when he was a teenager, along with the fact that he was a veteran with PTSD, they just became more convinced that he was actually the murderer. The police immediately went to Julie's family's house and broke the news to her parents. They told her that Julie had been found in Sam's apartment and that it seemed like Sam might have been the killer since he was nowhere to be found. Which, like, I find that really shitty that the cops said that. Like, I don't feel like they're allowed to say that, but I don't know. Like,
It doesn't seem very professional.
yeah.
That's what I would be thinking as a cop, but I don't think that it's okay to say that and if you don't know.
But Julie's family, just like Sam's, didn't believe it. They couldn't understand how Sam could have done this to someone he thought loved like family. So the news of Julie's murder began circulating around the town and specifically around the apartment complex. Daniel and Rachel found out about Julie's murder while at a cast party that night. After hearing the details of how Julie's body was found, which, like, that's another thing. How was the details of the crime scene leaked to people the same day? They immediately started to suspect that Sam actually might be the killer. So, like, people are now like, Sam's gone. He's probably the killer. The next day comes along, May 23rd. The police actually began putting up Sam's picture and information on wanted posters around town to spread the word that there was a murder suspect on the loose. Even the media broadcasted that Sam was armed and dangerous and to be avoided at all cost. In the meantime, because Sam's family did not believe he was guilty of murdering, Sam's dad began doing his own search. A while back, Sam had given his dad some paperwork that had contained a bunch of Sam's personal information, just in case there was ever an emergency and his dad needed it, which is like a super smart idea, by the way.
Yeah, that is. Also, I'm thinking like it does suck that they're blaming Sam and putting out notifications to the public that he could be dangerous and stuff. But I feel like if they didn't do something like that and they were treating him as a missing person when there was a girl found dead in his apartment, and then if it in a world where it was him and then he hurt someone else would be pretty terrible too.
Yeah. No, I definitely think they were doing the right thing. It just sucks. So Steve has Sam's information, which is awesome. A while back, like early episodes, we created a oh shit folder and it's on our website overmydeadpod.com. And you can fill out the PDF and it's basically just a bunch of information about yourself, your history, people around you kind of thing. And in case you ever go missing or something ever happens to you, somewhere someone's going to have that information.
Yeah, it's such a good idea. When I was a guest on the podcast for another podcast, which we'll talk about at some point when it gets released, but they were asking me what are some of the recommendations for young women, young people, really anybody, stay safe. And that was one of the things that I said was keep records of your passcodes and let somebody know where they're at, because there's been cases we've talked about where the police need to look through someone's Snapchat or Instagram and they have to like subpoena the company to get those records. And that's precious time that you don't have.
So Steve was able to sign into his son's bank account. And on May 24th, he was able to see that money was being moved out of Sam's account. Someone was withdrawing cash from different ATMs and using Sam's debit card. Obviously, Steve thought this was very weird, so he gave and passed on the information to the Costa Mesa police. The police immediately acted on this information and began sitting out at some of the ATM locations that had been used. Steve also decided he was going to do the same thing, but in other places in order to get more eyes out for Sam. While Steve was out searching, one of the places he was at was this local pizzeria in Long Beach. And little did Steve know at the time, but he had actually been watching Tim Wozniak pace around the pizzeria for a bit. Tim was Daniel's brother. Tim looked really frazzled. He was speaking loudly on the phone to someone, but Steve right then and there didn't know who Tim was. He didn't even know who Daniel was. So that later on, he like finds out, oh, I remember that dude. He was walking around the pizzeria really weird. But cool that Steve like kept that in his head as well. Anyways, moving on. So Steve started calling around to Sam's friends to see when they last heard or saw from him. And one of the calls that he made was to Jake's roommate, Dave. Jake is the kid that showed up to the apartment. Dave told Steve that the last day he had seen Sam was on May 21st with this actor dude who lived in the apartment complex. And that's how Steve first made contact with Daniel. So Steve calls up Daniel and asks to speak to him about Sam. And of course, Daniel is so happy to do so. When they spoke, Daniel told Sam's dad that Sam had really opened up to him that night about having woman problems lately and that family issues had been going on. But right away, Steve was like, Daniel's lying to me. There were no issues going on in the family. Their family had a great relationship, and Steve spoke to his son almost every day. He also didn't think that there was any women issue going on.
Daniel is not a good actor.
Yeah. Well, maybe he's a good actor, but he was saying information that Steve immediately knew was not true.
Mm.
You know, so I don't know if Daniel was a good actor. I'm not on his side, you know. So one thing that did make Steve feel even like more weird about this conversation with Daniel is on top of what he was saying, Daniel was kind of joking around and poking fun the whole time. Like Steve was there talking about his son missing, and Daniel was like, So Steve got bad vibes right away from Daniel and actually ended up going back to the police station and telling them about his conversation with Daniel and that Daniel might have something to do with Sam's disappearance. So like cool that he got like weird vibes enough that he's like, I think I'm going to act on this. When the police spoke to Sam's friend Jake, he told them that he had spoken to Daniel and Rachel after Sam went missing, and Daniel told him that on the 21st, him and Sam actually moved stuff out of the theater and came back to the apartment complex, and that after Sam had actually left his apartment with a man in a black baseball cap. At first, Daniel told Jake that this guy with the black baseball cap was a short Mexican dude, but later changed it to a short white guy. Obviously, Jake thought this was super weird, so he tried to pry Daniel for more information. When Jake tried to do that, Rachel grabbed Daniel and told him it was time to go. So they're acting a little sketch. At some point, the police were able to pull up surveillance pictures and videos from one of the ATMs that had used Sam's debit card. Fortunately, in this story, the surveillance cameras were working.
Whoa.
What?
In the video, they saw that a smaller kid with a skateboard was withdrawing the money. But the police obviously had no idea who the kid was. They weren't expecting to see that person. The next day on May 26th, the police went over to Daniel and Rachel's apartment to speak with them. Speaking to them one at a time, Daniel told the cops that he last saw Sam on Friday and that he had left with a man in a black baseball cap. Daniel said he didn't know who the man was and he didn't know where him and Sam were going. While Daniel was being questioned, Rachel barged into the room unannounced and asked if everything was okay. At this point, the police noticed that Daniel started visibly shaking, so the officers asked for Rachel to continue waiting in the other room. They would talk to her when they were done. After speaking with Daniel, the officers went on to talk to Rachel, who gave them a completely identical story. Rachel told them that she had been in the apartment with Daniel and Sam when this unknown man came over to get Sam. But if you remember, that guy who gave money to Daniel on loan, Chris, was actually at the apartment when all of this was going down, waiting for Daniel to give him the cash because Daniel was gone for like hours. And Chris stated that Daniel never came back with Sam to the apartment after the theater, and he never saw Sam at all. So the whole fact of like them all saying Sam was at the apartment was kind of like not making sense. The police started to question if Daniel or Rachel were telling the truth at all. So that same day, a cop was told to follow Daniel's movements, and at some point, Daniel left his apartment and drove to a house in Long Beach. This is where the officer saw a teenage boy hand Daniel an envelope, and then Daniel left. The cop decided to wait at the house for a few minutes, and when he did, he saw a pizza guy show up and hand the teenager some pizzas. When the cop pulled over the delivery driver, the driver told him that the pizza was from Echo's Pizza and it was under the name of Sam. This is the same place that Sam's ATM card had been used at earlier. The cops were like getting hyped up. They just saw some pizza getting delivered to an unknown house. The pizza was ordered under the name of Sam. It was paid using his debit card, put two and two together, and were like, Sam's at this house hiding out right now. They decided to raid the house right away. But when they showed up to the house with their guns drawn, a 16-year-old kid named Wesley answered the door. Inside was just him and some of his friends eating the pizza. The officers forced Wesley to the ground and arrested him. And when they took him in for questioning, Wesley tried to play it off. But when they told him that the debit card was tied to a murder investigation and they saw the surveillance footage of him using Sam's card, Wesley broke down in tears and said that he didn't know who Sam was, but yes, he had been using his debit card. When the cops asked him how he got the debit card, he said he had got it from a guy named Daniel. Wesley went on to tell the police that Daniel Wozniak had explained to him he was working for a bail bondsman and that one of his clients had skipped bail. And Daniel needed a third party to withdraw some money from the person's card so he could give it to the head bondsman, which, like, I get it. You're a child. You don't understand this whole process, but that don't make any sense. Daniel even had paperwork to show Wesley to make it all seem more real. So when the cops asked Wesley how he knew Daniel, he told him that he had met Daniel 6 years ago at the local theater when they did a production together, and that Daniel was kind of like a big older brother to him, so he would really do whatever he wanted or said. Wesley went on to say that Daniel had him take $400 out of the ATM each day starting on the 21st, and that every time he did it, he was to wear a hat and sunglasses to protect his identity. And then at the end of each of these days, Daniel would come to the house and get the money from Wesley in an envelope. That night, Daniel was actually out having his bachelor's party because the next day was his wedding. He was currently at dinner with some of his friends in Huntington Beach when out of nowhere, the police busted into the restaurant and arrested Daniel for bank fraud. When they got to the police station, Daniel told the investigators that Sam had convinced him into a fraud scheme. He said that the plan was to have someone withdraw the money from Sam's debit card, and then Sam would report the missing money as stolen. Therefore, the bank would then reimburse him. Daniel basically blamed it all on Sam and said this was all Sam's idea. And when the cops asked about Wesley, Daniel said that he and Sam thought since Wesley was younger, if he ever got in trouble for this, he would be let off easier because he was a minor. Then, without being asked or prompted, Daniel went on to tell the following story. He told the police that on the morning of May 22nd, this is the night after Julie and Sam went missing, around 8 a.m., Sam knocked on Daniel and Rachel's apartment door and told Daniel that they were in trouble. So Daniel hopped in Sam's car and he drove around town with Sam, explaining that there was a dead person in his apartment. Sam then told Daniel that as soon as he had left Daniel's apartment the night before, he started drinking and taking drugs because he was really stressed out about his family, and that he ended up texting Julie to come over so he could have a shoulder to cry on. But when Julie went to Sam's apartment, Sam decided he wanted to have sex with her and she said no. So he proceeded to pull out a gun and shoot Julie twice in the head. Of course, when Daniel's telling the cops all of this, he was saying that he was in a lot of shock and that he didn't know how to respond to Sam. Daniel went on to tell them that Sam had threatened him after telling him about the murder, and that he said if Daniel ever went to the police, he would come back and kill both him and Rachel. Daniel said it was Sam's plan to get Daniel to withdraw the money and funnel it to him so that he could escape and be on the run, and in return, Sam was going to give Daniel some money to help pay off his upcoming wedding. Daniel told the cops that he didn't tell anyone about this because he was scared of what Sam might do to him. And when the cops asked Daniel about his original story involving the unknown man in the black ball cap, Daniel said, "Sorry, I lied about that. I was just scared of Sam."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's just a lot of, a lot of stuff going on.
Does this mean he's going to miss his wedding?
The detective then told Daniel that they were going to take a cheek swab for DNA to ensure that he would be eliminated as a suspect. And they asked him if they were going to find any of his DNA on Julie. This is when Daniel started to freak out and said that Sam was threatening his life and what did they expect him to do? A weird response, but okay. The investigators knew that Daniel wasn't telling the truth at this point, so they told him that he was being arrested for accessory to murder. And that's when Daniel's reality really started to sink in, and he said that he would tell them everything they wanted to hear as long as he could still show up for his wedding the next day. But obviously, the police refused to bargain with him, so Daniel stopped talking. After sitting in silence for a while, Daniel's nerves began to kick back in, and he finally told them, "Yes, I saw the fucking body," which, they didn't ask about. He then said he saw 2 gunshots in the back of her head, but if you remember earlier, he told them that Sam had shot Julie twice. So obviously, Daniel is now being, caught in his own lies, which, While all of this is going down, Daniel's fiancée Rachel is back at their apartment, sitting with some of Sam's friends, waiting to hear from the police. That's when Rachel got a text that Daniel had been arrested, and she ended up telling the guys in the apartment, but none of them seemed to be surprised. Sam's friends, Jake, David, and Miles, all later said that this is when Rachel started to begin acting really weird. She was very calm about the whole situation of her fiance getting arrested. Anytime anything else was brought up, she would change the conversation immediately. Not long after Daniel's arrest, the police showed up to his apartment and asked Rachel to come down to the police station to talk to Daniel, which she did. In the interrogation room, Daniel told Rachel that Sam had killed Julie and he had helped him cover it up. The whole time, the detectives were watching Rachel as she made no expressions and had no reactions to what Daniel was saying. After Rachel talked to Daniel, she told the investigators that Daniel had been freaking out on the day of the 21st because she found out he owed money to some bad people. When the police asked Rachel if they knew about Daniel's crimes that he had admitted to, Rachel responded by saying, "Hell no." Which, like, okay, that's a response. With no evidence against Rachel except for the fact that she was just acting fucking weird, Rachel left the police station and went back to her apartment as Daniel then spent the night in jail. Rachel began to notify her family that Daniel had been arrested and that she was calling off the wedding. Rachel then went to Daniel's family's house, and when she arrived, only his dad was home. Rachel told him that Daniel had been arrested, but apparently he barely reacted to the news as well. On her way out, Rachel ran into Daniel's brother Tim and his girlfriend. She told Tim about Daniel, and when she did, Tim began to get really nervous and started to fumble with his phone. It was at this moment that Rachel also noticed Tim had a gun on his hip, which was something he had never had before. On her way back to the apartment, Rachel got a call from jail from Daniel. When she asked him about what he had done, he told her that he had helped Sam cover up some stuff and get drugs, but that he didn't kill anyone. And when Rachel asked why he did that, Daniel responded saying that they needed the money. It was at this point that Rachel had a full fucking meltdown on the phone and began yelling at Daniel. She told him that she had just left his parents' house and she had run into Tim, and it looked like Tim maybe had some evidence on him, which I'm also confused. I saw this in 2 different articles. I'm confused because she was like, Daniel, your brother Tim had evidence on him. I'm going to go to the cops. She's talking about the gun. How did she know? Like, how did she get that vibe that the gun on his brother's hip had anything to do with what was going on?
I don't know. Did she recognize it? Because Daniel had stolen it, right? Is that the one from his parents' house?
I don't know.
Maybe she recognized it, or maybe she's just stupid. I don't know.
Could be either.
When she said this to Daniel, he replied that he was fucked. Daniel said that Tim did have evidence on him, but that she shouldn't go to the cops about it because if they found that evidence, he would be dead. And Rachel responded on the phone, "Babe, you're already dead," which also, like, weird. Daniel told Rachel to come to the police station so he could tell her exactly what he did. He said that she probably already knew at this point, but whatever she thought Daniel did, he had done much worse. He ended up hanging up the phone with Rachel, saying that she was never going to see him again. This is still at a period of time because it happens today. It's been happening for a long time. Jail and prison phone calls are recorded. And, like, people don't remember that. So, like, they're just talking on the phone, saying all this stuff, and it's being recorded. That doesn't come up in the story, but I'm just throwing that out there.
How dumb can you be?
It happens all the time, but it's so
Yeah.
glorious when it does.
Yeah. So the next day, May 27th comes around, and Daniel told the jail personnel that he needed to speak with the investigators. Brought him into an interrogation room. Daniel said, quote, "I'm crazy and I did it." When the investigators asked Daniel what he was talking about, he said that he had killed Julie and he had killed Sam. He then, unprompted, once again, because this dude just loves to talk, told the police that on May 21st, he lured Sam into the local theater by asking him to help him move some stuff. And when Sam and Daniel went up into the attic to get a piece of furniture, Daniel shot Sam in the back of the head. Sam fell to the ground and looked up at Daniel and said, "I need some help. I've been electrocuted," which is, like, so sad. He had no idea that he'd just been shot. And it was at that point that Daniel then shot Sam again in the head, killing him. Daniel then stole Sam's wallet and cell phone and left Sam's lifeless body in the attic of a theater. Daniel then went on to come up with a plan and convinced Wesley into helping him with the ATM money. In the end, before Daniel ended up being caught and stuff like that, he had only withdrawn $2,000. So, like, this was all for $2,000. Daniel left the theater around 5 p.m. and he started using Sam's phone call to text Julie to lure her to the apartment complex. Around 9 p.m. that night, Daniel was actually performing in a play at the theater while Sam's body laid upstairs in the attic. You can kill somebody and then just go perform a theater play downstairs. Like, that's so weird.
Under their body.
Under the body. So after the play, Daniel and Rachel went back to their apartment. And after Rachel had gone to bed, Julie texted Sam's phone saying she had arrived. That's when Daniel went upstairs to Sam's apartment using his keys. And Daniel ended up meeting Julie at the front door of Sam's apartment and told her, Sam's inside. He needs to talk to you in the bedroom. Once Julie entered the bedroom, Daniel ended up shooting her in the back of the head twice. He was trying to make this whole plan thing around making it look like Sam. So he basically killed Julie for no reason to make Sam look more guilty so that they didn't think he had anything to do with it.
That's a stupid plan. Okay.
And then Daniel planned to make the scene look like Sam had killed Julie and that he had been involved in a love triangle with her and her online boyfriend. Daniel then, sadly, cut open the back of Julie's clothes to make it look like she had been sexually assaulted by Sam and proceeded to write with a black Sharpie on her shirt the note that was found. Just another little sad note too. Julie was still wearing that tiara from her future sister-in-law that she got at dinner that night. The day after the murders, Daniel drove out to Rachel's brother's house in order to borrow an axe and saw from him. He told him that it was for a project at the theater, so her brother thought nothing of it. He then drove to the theater and used the tools to dismember parts of Sam's body. After doing that, Daniel then drove out to a park called El Dorado Park and discarded some of Sam's limbs. At this point in the story, because he's telling all of this to the investigators, this is how we're finding it out. They didn't ask him, he just started telling the story. But at this part in the story, when they asked Daniel why he did it, he responded, for money and insanity, which he's really trying to play up that insanity card now.
Yeah, I wish you could see my face.
Yeah.
For money and insanity. Okay, yeah.
I'm a crazy person.
Literally the opposite of insanity is a reason.
Or awareness that you are insane.
That you're crazy.
Yeah.
So once the police were able to start digging around Daniel's information and personal items, investigators found that these murders were definitely planned in advance because on May 17th, which is 4 days before the murders, Daniel had Googled things, which come on, people, don't Google shit. I'm not telling you to do anything wrong, but don't Google how to hide a body and what's the fastest way to kill people.
How to be insane.
I will say I've probably Google searched some weird shit in my days. And every time I do something like that, I think about my FBI person watching me somewhere.
We're on a list.
I'm totally on a list of something. They're oh, there goes Kate again. She's looking up weird shit.
Every time I'm researching a case and I'm Googling very specific questions about a serial killer, and I'm
Yes.
This is not gonna look good. I hope they know I have a podcast.
They don't. They
yeah,
totally don't.
No, they do. They know everything. Your FBI agent is sitting there oh my gosh, this is 2 more hours of paperwork I got to fill out on you. Just
the weekend after the murders had happened, Rachel's brother Noah had actually posted on his Facebook account complaining how Daniel had borrowed his truck unannounced for the weekend. But afterwards, once he realized what had happened, Noah deleted the Facebook post. And once the police found this out, they ended up arresting Noah and charged him with accessory to murder. But Noah pleaded not guilty because he literally had nothing to do with it. And after further investigation, the charges were dropped. I will say, the police are just throwing out some charges in this case and arresting people. Poor Wesley. I mean, I don't really feel like they needed to stomp on a 16-year-old and bring him to jail.
No, usually we're complaining that they're not arresting people. Now they're arresting
Here,
the entire
boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
You're going to jail. You're going to jail.
Everybody's going to jail. After Daniel finished telling the detectives all the details about Sam and Julie's murder, he went back to his jail cell and attempted to commit suicide. Dun, dun, dun. Fortunately, Daniel was taken to the hospital and was treated for his self-inflicted head injuries. Apparently, all he had been doing was smashing his head against the cell concrete walls, and he ended up being sent back to his prison cell only 2 days later. So he didn't really get that far in it,
Did he get the vest?
Probably. I don't know, but he probably did. The same day that Daniel admitted to his crimes and tried to commit suicide, the police went up to the theater to see the crime scene in the attic for the first time. And to their shock, because Daniel forgot to mention this in his story, they found Sam's naked, headless body. Along with his head, Sam was also missing only his hands and upper arms. The rest of his body was there. So they assumed, due to what was missing, that Daniel was just trying to hide the body's identity, but he didn't like get rid of the whole body. He just left it there.
He's just lazy.
This is a lazy boy.
Lazy
Can't
boy.
get a job.
No.
Can't dispose of a body.
Yeah. So after searching for the theater for more evidence, the police made their way to the El Dorado Park in search of Sam's missing body parts. And within a few minutes of being there, they were able to find severed hands and arms located in a very shallow hole that had been covered up with leaves.
You can't even dig a hole deep enough.
This dude is just doing everything wrong.
Oh God.
He made a little hole through him in there and then was like putting some leaves together.
Oh,
Forget this.
Pat. They didn't find Sam's head that day. They didn't find Sam's head until June 5th, but they did. Back to Rachel now. Remember how she had told the police about Tim having a gun on him the night that Daniel got arrested? Well, it turns out that gun, in fact, was the gun that Daniel killed both Sam and Julie with. After committing the murders, Daniel made and gave a large box to his brother Tim and instructed him to not open it, but to discard it in some manner, like burning it. Inside of this box, there was a backpack filled with evidence items. Some of the items that I was able to find in the backpack were Daniel's bloodstained clothes from the night of the murders, the murder weapon, the gun, the saw and the axe he had borrowed from Rachel's brother, and even some of Sam's personal items that Daniel had taken from his apartment. When the police found out that Tim had kept all of these items, they arrested him and his girlfriend and charged both of them with being accessories to the murder.
what's the girlfriend?
Because she was there. He had the gun on his hip. She was around. So, like, you're
Oh,
going to jail. You're going to jail. But as expected, both of them pleaded not guilty, and they ended up posting bail and being able to go home. A few weeks after the murders, Sam's dad, Steve, and Julie's brother, whose name is Taka, Taka, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, they met up to talk and compare notes on what they had on the case. But when the police found out that this meetup had occurred, they warned Steve and Taka to never speak to each other again while this case was happening. But they didn't give two shits because they were like, first of all, it's not legal to meet up. But they also didn't care if they weren't supposed to meet because they had both lost family members in this tragic event and they wanted to find some answers. Weeks later, Julie's body ended up being cremated. She was wearing the tiara that her brother and fiance gave her when they cremated her, which is like super sad. And in August of 2010, her family ended up taking some of her ashes to Japan to scatter them. That's like her family's homeland. One of the things that Julie's mom did is that she kept some of Julie's ashes and she keeps it in her bedroom. And one of her mother's wishes, which is in her will, is that eventually when she passes away and is cremated, that her ashes are mixed with Julie's.
hmm.
Isn't that so sad? As for Sam, he ended up being buried, and he was buried with full military honors just shy of his 27th birthday. Okay, so now let's go to the trial. The district attorney's office pushed for the death penalty for Daniel. Daniel actually ended up being assigned a public defender because his family refused to pay for any legal things for him. After Daniel's arrest and before the trial began, Rachel did continue to visit Daniel for a few months, even though she had called off their wedding and engagement. And at some point, Daniel told her that after his suicide attempt, he had seen a vision from God. Apparently, Daniel was now religious and started reading the Bible in prison. Since Rachel was religious herself, she was very happy about this newfound relationship that Daniel had with God, and she would often bring him different scriptures to read to people in jail. She would even bring a pastor in with her sometimes when she would go to visit Daniel. But at some point, Rachel decided she was done with Daniel, and one day during her normal visits to jail, she walked up to Daniel sitting behind the glass, gave him 2 middle fingers, and said she was never going to see him again. And then she just walked away and never went back to visit him.
Yeah, do we think she knew about it ahead of time? Because she was acting weird
Yes.
the whole time.
Yeah. I'm going to say yes. We're also going to talk about it in a minute. Okay, so here's a little fun fact. While Daniel was awaiting his trial, he actually ended up going on the TV show Locked Up. In his interview on the show, he comes off as this good guy. He said that everyone who knew him would say he didn't commit these crimes. He was innocent. He didn't murder anyone, and that he planned on fighting the charges. He also said that he missed Rachel and that she was still his fiance, and they were planning on getting married after he was let go. Rachel said the opposite. At some point, one of Sam's friends created a Facebook group called Sam's Buddies. This Facebook group allowed for his friends and family to kind of come together and celebrate his life. People would often post memories, photos, videos of their time with Sam, and this group often shared updates about the trial and what was going to come. Before Sam's murder, he was actually supposed to be the best man at one of his friend's upcoming weddings. Since he was no longer there, the groom ended up asking Sam's dad, Steve, to step in for him instead. Which, like, how sweet is that?
Mm-hmm.
As for the local theater that Daniel and Rachel went to, people really struggled with the fact of what happened in the attic, and they started to not go to any more performances, and people kind of just stopped auditioning too. So the theater ended up closing its doors in 2012. Also in 2012, which is about 2 years after the murders, police were able to finish collecting their evidence on the case and were ready for trial. A grand jury voted to indict Daniel on 2 murder charges, but also gave him multiple other charges that were considered special circumstantial charges. And this was for committing multiple murders for monetary gain. Daniel, of course, pleaded not guilty to everything, even though he's the one that told the police everything a few years prior. On November 20th, 2012, the police ended up arresting Rachel and charged her with 3 counts of accessory to murder. When people later asked why Rachel wasn't arrested sooner, the police responded that they didn't want to arrest her too early, because if they arrested her for accessory to murder like right away, only to find out that she was one of the murderers later on, they wouldn't be able to like recount it. Yeah, so like it makes sense. I mean, they were throwing accessory to murder at everybody else, but I guess they were waiting for Rachel because they were like, we don't want to mess up on this one, just in case.
Were they waiting on Daniel to like incriminate her or something, maybe?
Probably, because he just talks without being asked to talk. So Rachel's family didn't believe for a second that she had anything to do with the murders. And they even, in fact, rallied the whole town to get her bond reduced from $100,000 to $50,000. So once the bond was reduced, Rachel was able to make bail and she went to stay at her family's house. After Rachel left jail, she kind of went on like this PR tour around town. She was doing interviews with media, interviews with broadcasters. And this whole time she's like, I'm innocent, blah, blah, blah. And then, you guys are going to love this, February 5th, 2013, Rachel went on the Dr. Phil show.
Oh.
Yes, she did. And she went on the Dr. Phil show to defend herself against the charges. If you guys want to watch some of the Dr. Phil episode, go online and watch it. I highly recommend it. It's a really good episode. And to Rachel's surprise, Sam's dad, Steve, ended up making an appearance on the same episode and heavily defended the fact that Rachel was guilty and deserved to go to prison. Overall, Dr. Phil show wasn't a good idea for Rachel. It definitely painted her in a bad light, and even the public saw that. So going back to the trial, it ended up being 5 years in between the murders and the beginning of the trial. This is because Daniel's public attorney literally did everything possible to push the trial date back. He would constantly make motions that the prosecutors were acting unlawfully in their search of evidence, or that the sheriff's office committed misconduct. Get this, y'all are going to love this part. The public defender even attempted to file a 5,000-page motion that included 20,000 pages of exhibits.
I know how much public defenders get paid. There's no reason for you to be doing all this.
No. He was doing everything possible to try to push the trial date because he obviously didn't have anything good happening, you know?
Yeah, at that point, I'd be like, hey, dude, we should probably just plead guilty.
Yeah. Well, get this. They even had to get a new judge to be appointed to the case because the original judge stepped down, citing that he was so pissed off at the public defender, he didn't think he would be able to judge the trial fairly.
That's crazy.
Holly, you worry about being annoying in the courtroom. You never had that happen to you.
Obviously, I'm not that annoying.
Yeah. To make things even more sad, during these delays, Julie's mom ended up being diagnosed with cancer. She begged the court and the attorneys to stop with the delays because the anxiety of waiting 5 years was just making her more sick. Before the trial even began, there was 192 court hearings. Sam's dad, Steve, attended every single one of them. On December 9th, 2015, More than 5.5 years after the murders, Daniel's trial began. During the trial, not a single family member of Daniel's showed up. Actually, the only person who showed up for Daniel was this woman who found the case interesting and began writing to Daniel in prison. She ended up creating a blog about Daniel in the case and said that she was going to publish a book someday and give the money to Daniel. I don't understand people like this. I understand it a little bit, actually, but
If they're innocent, I understand, but he confessed.
Do they end up being together?
no.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, actually. I didn't look into that much further, but we could see that happening, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So at the trial, the defense made no opening statements and did not call any witnesses to the stand. But when it came to the prosecution, one of the witnesses who did come to testify against Daniel was the teenager Wesley. Another witness who came and testified was Daniel's own brother, Tim. He told the courtroom about how Daniel had given him the bag of evidence and how he tried to get rid of it. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours, and a day later, on December 16th, 2015, Daniel Wozniak was found guilty on both counts of murder. Almost a year later, the death penalty was requested by the prosecution, and the judge accepted it. But in the state of California, all death sentences were automatically appealed. As for Daniel's brother, Tim actually went on, because remember, he got charged. He actually went on to plead guilty to being an accessory for murder after the fact, and he was sentenced 3 years probation. All charges against Tim's girlfriend were dropped, which is good because she had nothing to do with it. Only about a week after, Tim was actually arrested on a domestic violence charge. Apparently, his girlfriend was driving them in a car when he punched her in the chest, grabbed her wrist, and bit her.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim didn't do too hot, and he was on probation. So, he got in trouble for that. On September 5th, 2018, 8.5 years after the murders, Rachel's trial began. Remember Chris, the guy that Daniel borrowed money and owed money to? He ended up testifying against Rachel. He even said that Rachel tried to get him to come back to the apartment after he had left. And he said that he thought something bad was going to happen to him. And on stand, he said most likely he was going to be killed that night if he had gone back. On September 12th, 2018, a jury found Rachel guilty and she was sentenced to only 32 months in jail. But somehow, because this keeps happening, less than a year later, she was released from prison. But in 2019, the governor of California placed a stop on all executions in the state of California. It meant no more executions were going to take place while he was in office. But that being said, California has not executed anyone since 2006. So, it ain't happening in the state of California.
That's the place to go.
Yep. As for Daniel, since it was unlikely that Daniel was going to be executed anytime soon, he actually was moved out of the San Quentin State Prison and moved to a place called Salinas Valley State Prison as a part of an inmate transfer program. At this new prison, Daniel was going to be working odd jobs here and there to raise money to help repay back the victims' families. That is the end of the case of Daniel Wozniak and Rachel Buffett.
What a shit show for some money.
And it was all because one night Sam told Daniel in the hot tub about the money he had from, being a soldier, and two people who shouldn't have been killed. First of all, Julie should not have been killed whatsoever. It makes no sense that she was killed. She was just killed to make Sam look guilty.
You're going to get a bunch of people saying, no one should be killed.
No one should be killed. No one has any permission to be killed.
Edit all that out. I would rephrase, Kate. Everybody attacked me when I said on my TikTok when I was like, a murder that should have never happened. No murder should ever happen.
Whatever. I'm not rephrasing shit. Come at me. And with that, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. If you want even more information, including photos of the case, you can check us out on our blog at overmydeadpod.com. Be sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and check us out on social media at Over My Dead Pod. And we will see you next week with another case. Bye.
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 You guys want to jump right into overtime?
I prepared something. My topic for today is, on TikTok, people talk about their very odd specific icks for men. I've started to compile a list of my very oddly specific icks. And the number one ick I have is when he's trying to merge into a lane and no one will let him in.
And he gets frustrated?
I just feel like that's like such beta male. You can't even merge into a lane.
It's not his fault.
Still,
No one's letting him in.
when you're playing beer pong and the ball bounces off the table and he has to go chase after it.
That little chase, like the little.
Yeah, and you're like hunched over,
Yeah.
walking back to the couch after his turn of bowling,
Like, what
Yeah.
do you do? Like a little dance, or like a
or you just like awkwardly
Little-
walk back, like, oh, my turn's over.
yeah.
Running under the garage door after hitting the button and jumping over the sensor so it doesn't open again.
Kylie, these are great.
Someone's down the line. You have seen someone do all of these because, like, where
Yes.
these are on point, but like, where are you getting these from? These are great.
It's just life. Not going down the water slide, but popping out at the end of it.
And they're like drowning for a second.
Yeah. Similar, being strapped into a roller coaster by the employee.
Kylie, these are good.
You guys have any weird ones?
Yes, actually, one that I just recently witnessed, watching a full-grown man walk in a pool that's like shallow, and they're hunched down, like trying to stay in the water, and they're walking in the water.
Oh.
That's like the shallow end.
Yeah, they're crouched so their shoulders are
And
under
it's
the
like
water.
Yeah, they're crouched
move,
down,
move.
walking in the water. Ew,
Oh yeah, that is icky.
so icky.
How do you guys even come up with these? That's hilarious.
You got to see it, and then you got to feel it.
You're like, oh, that's the ick. I did have another one, but I didn't say it because I feel like this might apply to Kate's husband. When they
He
do
doesn't
like
listen. It's fine.
they like practice their golf swing just like randomly, like
Yep.
out in public.
All the time.
Yeah, or like free throw or like shadow boxing. Oh, that's a big ick.
Oh, I
Yeah.
have another one. And this kind of applies to really anybody, not just guys, but especially men, when they're playing the guitar and you're just sitting there watching them play the guitar.
Oh, that's the worst.